We are continuing the theme of trying new things and expanding horizons. So a while back, my bed died, and we replaced it with a shiny, comfy new. As we were dismantling the old one, my squirrel hoarding tendencies kicked in, and I squirreled away all 28 of the supportive bed slats. My justification for this is that it will be useful one day. So I've decided to make today that day. So in this local full tries, we're going to be painting one of these. I will be frank, I'm not sure where to go with this. I've never painted on wood before, you know, as is the theme here. And I've never worked so, long and thin. We'll see. Okay, before I got started with any of the actual painting or design, I sanded down the edges of the wood first so there wouldn't be any splinters during painting or preparation. I then gave the side that I would be painting on a nice coating of white acrylic gesso. At the time, I was hoping that the gesso would help prevent any big bleeds from the paint into the wood grain and provide more of a white backdrop so the colours I used would stand out and not be more desaturated than they would be otherwise. And then came the search for inspiration. See, I've been thinking a lot about my style and how I want to go forward as an artist, and I've decided that I want something a tad more whimsically moment in time in the scenes and illustrations I do, while retaining the darker themes and imagery that I like, and maybe adding a tad more colour than I'm initially comfortable with but feel confident enough to progress into. And since this is the first thing I've done since doing the 100 penny painting challenge, I decided to let myself relax a little bit and not do any preliminary sketching or plans. I just started. I just went with what I thought would flow naturally. It was so nice to just let myself doodle and see what came out rather than using a lot of my mental energy to brainstorm, which sometimes, if you're drawing just for fun, sometimes doing it the professional way detracts from the fun of it. In the interest of not having the line art show through the final painting, I used a blue pencil that I had lying around. Something about how soft it was just stuck with me more than my usual hard graphite, even though details were a little harder to make out when I came back to it. And next came painting the first layer. I used gouache that had been thinned out a lot to act like watercolour with the intent of using layers to build contrast and tone, the same as I would normally do. I've been worried about the paint bleeding, but turns out that it barely happened, which I was very, very grateful for. I think the gesso did a wonderful job. Okay, so it's been several days, and this is taking a lot longer than I initially thought that it would. Bearing in mind that I'm actually trying to make a decent piece of artwork with unfamiliar tools, I think I'm doing very well. I'm absolutely happy with the way the design is going. Seeing it all in colour now, I'm very, very happy with how different aspects of the piece work in tandem with each other. I think my favourite part is still the tentacles, but that's only because I haven't gotten to the skeletons yet. However, at this point in the process, things are lacking definition. This is both in part due to my inexperience with gouache, of that I'm certain, but also because my style is usually very, very lined, and I'm not at a point where I can simply use colour to denote shape and form, so I think I will be using lines quite a bit more in this piece than I initially anticipated, but I can't exactly complain. I like doing it. As it turns out, the initial colour layers actually had I'm not sure how to describe it, the colours were very flat, and that was the vibe I was looking for, more like a block print kind of thing. So I decided not to overpaint too much. I did very subtle highlights and shades to the tentacles, and that was about it. I did suffer a little bit trying to keep the background even, in part due to how bitty and full of sections it was thanks to the spirals, and also because I had a very small brush and had a very limited time to spread the paint around. And also due to me under or over mixing new paint, so that's one thing I should keep in mind for next time. Mix a lot of paint, even if it's too much, it's better than having none at all. So what you can see me doing here is a new technique that I was trying out, wherein I take a normal soft tip pen, like a colouring in pen like you find in the shops, the fairly cheap ones, and not only use them to outline, which is a new colour outline thing I've seen a lot of people do and I was excited to try, but also because they're water soluble, I could blend them out to fit in a little more with the gouache paint underneath, so they had like a nice ombre / shading effect to it. I was extremely happy with how this worked both on the swirls and on the tentacles, and it wasn't until I'd actually finished the whole project that I realised because these pens were so soluble, it meant that I couldn't mask the wood or varnish it or do anything because the pens would reactivate and smear all over the painting. I did a test just to make sure, and yeah, that's what happened. So in future on wood I would not be trying it again. However, I have a feeling if I do this on paper, if I ever intend to frame it, there's always a gap between the paper and the glass of the frame, which means it won't be damaged or water activated, and I could do this again in a much more permanent manner that's more protected. So we move on from the felt tip lining to fine liner lining. As I knew this piece I couldn't do detail with the paint, so I've had to move in with my fine liners, and I was worried about them, tearing a little bit on the texture of the wood, but turns out that didn't happen, which I'm immensely grateful for. And I went in with a brown fine liner this time. I think it's one of the sepia, a sepia toned fine liner, and that worked so much better with the yellow warm tone of the fabric, and it blended really nicely with the attempted shading I'd done with the gouache, so that went really strongly and set me up very well to go into the next part, the final part of the wood now. It is the lining. See, when it came to the skeletons, I wanted something more harsh than I'd done for the rest of the piece, just so they stood out a little bit more, I could get a bit more contrast. And I was worried that because it was on wood grain, because I used paint, I was worried that my liners would bleed, but thankfully none of them did, and I was able to get these lovely crisp lines, the likes that I usually try to do, but also slightly make thicker ones, colour them in a little bit, make sure that the white contrast with the gesso underneath and the paint around them was just enough so that they stood out without looking too drastically different from the rest of the painting. So all in all, I think those came out extremely well, and they are easily my favourite part. After so much stress, it was finally something familiar to do. It's finished. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching and your patience before this video came out. I know I've been gone for a while, but hopefully now that I've got some issues sorted out at home, I can be back on schedule and I can start producing content on the regular for you guys again. This has been a really fun ride. I'm going to release a couple more videos soon, so stay tuned, and I really appreciate your support. Until next time, goodbye and thank you.